When this podcast is released, I am in training, it's a very loose use of the word, to run 10k on May the 22nd, 2022, in order to raise money to help the people currently beleaguered in Ukraine. I'm trying to get medical assistance and help out there. So I have a GoFundMe page, Toby's Wheezing and Groaning for 10k for Ukraine. So if you enjoy this podcast, if you could send even the smallest amount over to that GoFundMe page, it would really help. Thank you very much. Hooray, it's Happy Times and Places, a Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which we accentuate the positive. I, Toby Hadoke, have to guess my special guests' favourite things about the Doctor Who story they've chosen for us to watch.
Hi Toby, this is Laurence Clark. I'm a stand-up comedian, writer, screenwriter and playwright. And the story that I picked for your podcast is Terminus.
Well, hello everybody. It's part 3 of Terminus, or for me as a youngster, it's half term, so I get to see the only episode of Doctor Who, bar Arc of Infinity, which was on before the school term started, of this year. It seems unthinkable now, but we didn't have a video. We only had, at this stage, a black and white portable television. I know, I seem so young, and yet I'm from the old times. And yes, young people, not only did you have to actually watch television when the programme was on or you were in trouble, some of us watched programmes that were made in colour in black and white, because the black and white TVs, and indeed the licence for black and white TV, was much cheaper. I know I sound like I'm from good stock, don't I? But we were skint as a... We were as broke. We had a lower budget than Doctor Who, had a lower household budget than Doctor Who's. Well, in the case of Terminus's budget for metal armour. Well, look, enough of my I were brought up in a shed with naught to eat and only black and white TV. Enough of that. Let us watch part 3 of Terminus. I'm going to press enter. I'm on the episode selection menu. So I'm going to press enter on part 3 in 3, 2, 1. And I'm a go. So, and I need to turn it has actually started, so don't be alarmed. I've just you can't hear it in the background because I had it on mute. There we go. Peter Davison's face has appeared with a Venetian blind effect. And here we are, the neon logo, Sid Sutton's title sequence. Oh, I was so excited to be back from school watching this. My friend Ollie had sort of told me, he didn't tell me everything that happened in the episodes, really. He just basically told me what the cliffhangers were, because that's what I asked for, and if anyone died. So yeah, the first thing I saw was this, and I remember this. I remember watching this and thinking, this is the first I'd seen of Turlough, although I'd heard about this new guy. I've cheated a little bit. Well, I haven't cheated. I've watched the making of documentary on the DVD, because my partner's not very well, so she'll occasionally fall asleep on the sofa, and I can't podcast next to what could be a corpse. But I really wanted to do this, so I watched the documentary by Brendan Shepherd, who I don't know, I've never met, and it's narrated by Floella Benjamin, and it's a really good piece. It's very much sort of nuts and bolts, but it explains the story. It's got Steve Gallagher on, who's very eloquent about what he wanted to do with the story. I do like Steve Gallagher. He's a nice bloke, and he's an intelligent writer who's ambitious with his sci-fi concepts. And it sort of talks about I think the really clever thing it does is, because Mary Ridge, the director, is not there to defend herself, they have an advocate in the form of Fiona Cumming, another Doctor Who director, but who knew Mary Ridge, and so sort of sometimes postulates how she felt Mary would have thought under certain circumstances. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do when when I think a lot of the failings of this in a sort of production history of it seem to seem to be attributed to the fact that Mary Ridge had studio days and hours and things taken off her and suddenly had to improvise off the hoof, and this was done, with a curtailed schedule. And I think that with the absence, without her to therefore advocate for herself, having Fiona coming there was good, and also good to see Scott Talbot and Alec Wheel, studio sound and senior cameraman, names you see on a lot of credits, interviewed. And Alec Wheel, I think, really should have been on more of the DVDs because he was such a key figure. Sadly, died a couple of years ago. Anyway, so I'm immersed in Terminus, and I'm, as I say, the only sort of issue I have with it is the sort of how static it is, and that does seem to be to do a lot with the staging. Because 42, for example, is set on a spaceship heading to disaster, but there's heat and there's shaking and there's everyone's really sort of tense, and there's just sort of energy about it. That's Graham Harper, isn't it, directing? And I do think that Stephen Gallagher having the concepts of let's invoke the Big Bang and let's have these the veneer who are forced to do what they do, and let's and how we deal with something like a disease, especially during these times of COVID, but with the enemy being an illness, and I know it's not leprosy, but Lazar disease plays with the it very much invokes the idea, and it's leprosy in all but name, isn't it? And that's got that's got an historical basis for us, and it's something that we have an angle on because we can understand it, but it's not something you see particularly in Doctor Who. I always think she sounds slightly brummy. I don't know much about Rachel Weaver, who plays Inga, but she sort of goes, I'd rather think we're going to die. But I don't know if that's brummy or glum, because there's not much between the two. I'm sorry, my brummy friends. And my nearest city is Wolverhampton, so the Midlands, the West Midlands is my world, and I have a lot of very good friends who speak in that accent. What my friend John Warburton, the comedian, calls the linguistic equivalent of lazy eye, which I always terribly funny. And I say that with affection because I got loads of friends who talk like that. Andrew Burt has to do a lot of, I seem to recall, being slightly pushed and then having to act like he's been really hurt. And they're very eloquent in the documentary about, because I hadn't realised that the costume designer Dee Robson had not been a favourite of John Nathan Turner. Reading between the lines of the memo he sent, it's a personality clash. But there were problems with this veneer armour, especially when the guy that made it was told late in the day, oh, they have to fight in it as well. So and the poor old sound designer talks about the fact that there's it does clatter somewhat. I actually think it's a nice design because they're slightly skeletal, but it is reminiscent of sort of brass etchings, those sort of knights. In brass etchings, and the colour helps with that as well. He is like a sexy sad vampire, is Martin Potter. He's interviewed on the documentary, and he says one thing. It's a you have to do a particular sort of acting to play these sorts of characters, and I quite like the idea. He invests that with. He quite enjoys the fact that Valgard hates him. And that's quite an interesting dynamic. That all of the veneer are, they're just staying alive, but it's not much of a life. They are a bit like vampires in a way. They feed off this particular substance, and to keep themselves alive just for the sake of being alive, but they don't seem to enjoy life very much. The radiation's too strong for them. And it's Nissa's final story, of course, as well, which I suppose we've been building up to with her doing her experiment at the top. Yes, I don't quite recognise your voice, but they obviously don't talk to each other that much. I was thinking about this android, the robot, the medical robot. I know what they're going for here, because there's a medical robot in Star Wars that has sort of spindly arms and lots of different attachments. So, oh yes, he noticed that he was. So I've done the story a disservice there. He noticed that it was an intruder. Good. Okay. Well done. Now that's the sort of thing I would have been annoyed that somebody at home did, where they go, and you go, well, if you'd stop talking, you'd actually realise that he has noticed that. But I have to talk during this, otherwise you'll just be listening to the episode. But yes, the medical robot, when you can do it on film and have proper little pistons and gears, those spindly arms and the different attachments can seem like a very efficient sort of medical robot, like the one in The Empire Strikes Back. And I had a toy of that, the medical droid. And that's what they're going for. It's just they have to make it on a BBC budget, and so it probably needs bigger mechanisms that are cheaper than, slender ones and all sorts of... And it's not shot on film. And, cardboard painted silver on film, that's not what they would have had in Empire Strikes Back, but it would still look better than on videotape. So here's what's Olvia come to do. Is he... Oh, yes, so... All right, I'm going. Doesn't he say that? Yeah. Now, Jarvik is what Andrew Burt is called in The Harvest of Kairos. Sexy garage mechanic Jarvik. And this is quite funny because they talk in the documentary of they've got these veneer masks which are excellent. They're a great design. Again, very sort of medieval night looking, but in order to be heard through them, they have to lift the visors up because otherwise they'd sound really muffled, which sort of defeats the other. It's a bit like in these COVID times, people who have masks on and wear them around their chin or above their eyes. So they're in this plague hole. They've got this protective armor, but every time they speak to each other or have to see the plague carriers they're herding about, they have to lift their protective helmet up. So poor old Turlo and Tegan. I'm surprised because I thought Turlo and Tegan spent all of episodes 2 and 3 in the ducts and on film, shot by Remiad Farazin. Yes, who he shot all sorts of things, hasn't he? Elizabeth, didn't he do that? And Johnny English. Didn't he shoot Band of Brothers? I mean, he's an excellent film cameraman. But I thought they spent all their time in the ducts, but no, they spent getting a bit sort of bored. But actually, they spend some of it bored sitting on steps as well. So I did the story a disservice when I said it's lots of people walking up and down steps. Sometimes people sit on them too. Oh yes, the story comes alive every time Peter Benson wanders in. I seem to recall, because he's only done the one bit in episode 2, but I seem to remember enjoying it. It's a nice makeup too, the burning on his face. He has a sort of old-fashioned Doctor Who-like quality about him. I'm surprised they didn't see him. He's not unlike David Fielder, actually, who they saw for Doctor Number 7. Did I say I had lunch with him at Kensington? I think I did, because he used to hang... I was doing a play, and one of the casts knew Peter Benson, and she said, "Have you been in Doctor Who?" And he said yes, and she said, "Will you have lunch with this young man, because he'd probably love to talk to you." So I had lunch with Peter Benson, and I don't remember much of what he said to me. I know it was a lovely lunch, and he was very chatty and jolly. And I remember we had spaghetti with tomato sauce in the cafe of this open air theatre, but I don't actually remember the content. So really, he's just a sort of notch on my bedpost, really, rather than somebody whose knowledge and experience benefited me. But I think that happens more and more. And I don't have the excuse that I have with some actors I later, got to spend some time with. I had some right old times with Bernard Kay, who unfortunately I remember very little of because he could drink a lot, and and as me too. But although I survived the level of drinking, my memory of the night did not. But I don't have that excuse with Peter Benson. I was young and sober as a judge. But he used to, I know he was mates with this, that you'd want a seat at that table, because I think there's a group of them that used to all sort of meet up in Kensington. And it's Peter Benson, John Gorrie, the director of The Keys of Marinus, Vernon Dobchev, the scientist, the scientist from the War Games, and also the patron saint of the acting profession, and a wonderful, wonderful man. Damon from Arc of Infinity, Paul Greenhalgh, who was the second Guardian in the Ark. Is that? But so I think there was that. I think they were all a bunch who'd all meet up and chat. You'd want to be a fly on that wall, wouldn't you? And of course, he became famous for being in Heartbeat later. But I love the sort of slightly quizzical, sort of forlorn thing that he's got going on, and that little sort of pause that he gives it to show that he's slightly off kilter. But I love his every intonation. It's very fresh, and he's not sending. Although he's undercutting the drama when he's talking about the engines exploding. He's not giving it the sort of welly that you need if you were doing the sort of dramatic thing with it. But he's not undermining it at all. He's taking it very, very seriously. He's just a very offbeat sort of performer who brings that slightly credulous, wonderful, benign energy to it. It's so lovely. And I'd sort of like that we get fed little bits about these people, but there's some nice aerial shots here too. It's so hard doing a fight in the studio, though. I mean, they do their best. John Waller was a very good fight director. But yes, look, this is Andrew Burt has to do a lot of selling this. And I do feel sorry for Boar's Wall. But Andrew Burt has to do that thing there where your arms get pushed up slightly, and that means you're really badly injured. I'm not sure I've ever been injured by that. And I'm sure that's not the only time. I thought, well, he had the thing in episode 2, didn't he, where Nissa sort of shoved him with the flat of her hand, and he had to sort of fall backwards and really sort of sell it. And I feel a bit sorry for him, because Andrew Burt was a very good actor. And he has to do lots of overreacting to not too much external stimulus. Oh, he's going to get beaten up by Dominic Guard later as well, isn't he? So the Garm's coming. I quite like the Garm. He's an unfortunate shape, but I think he's got a very sweet face. And it's nice to have a benign monster, as it were. But it's great watching. It's great hearing Stephen Gallagher in the documentary going, I thought it would be this sort of shape in the darkness with sort of glowing eyes, and that was it. I didn't know it would be what it is, which is a man who is both large in height and girth. But I do like his face. I do like the Garm's face. It's just the eyes that actually stop it being real in trying to give it some illumination. But I like he's got a slightly sort of benign thing going on as well. The way he just sort of looks rather sweetly and then carries on. Does Lisa Goddard actually do anything from now on apart from ask the Doctor questions? Because I know they rather optimistically offered the part to Twiggy, but because she starts off as this sort of space piratey thing, but I think she's just there. I'm not sure. I'm going to be interested to see if she has any lines that are actually lines that aren't just sort of what's happening and what are you doing now. Because I'm not sure I remember her doing an awful lot. And poor old Dominic Guard just has to follow Nyssa about like a sad teenager who's slightly upset his plague-ridden girlfriend's not keeps getting on the bus. Why did Turlough step on every step then? It's quite a small. The step acting on this. I mean, there's all sorts. There's sitting on the steps. There's walking slowly down the steps. There, Turlough could have, if he was in a real hurry, have leapt up 2 or 3 steps at a time. But no, he made sure every step got then. I also think it's very brave putting a character called Boar in this story. Yeah, the pilot of Terminus. Oh yes, there's a sort of skeletal chap, isn't there? But that is great. That is a great burn makeup. And it's. Oh, that's not really. Oh, that's a good line. That's an excellent line. And yes, and they can't waste the hydromel on somebody who might be dead. Oh, there's a nice shadow there on the very grey wall. I was very excited to hear the Black Guardian. I mean, he does have a magnificent voice. And of course, he's the voice of Deep Thought in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and we had the record of that. So, having Deep Thought in the fact that he was Deep Thought and he was the Black Guardian, and it is an amazing voice. I mean, honey steeped in treacle, steeped in gravel, and marinated in pipe tobacco, and honed on the British stage. I love it because he's Burgundy, isn't he? In Olivier's Henry V, so a real old stager. So the Black Guardian has spoken in riddles to Turlough. I assume that's to prove to himself, the Black Guardian, that Turlough is actually worth having employed, so that he doesn't have to tell him what to do. But he does seem to spend a lot of his time going, "I'll give you one more chance," and Turlough goes, "Oh, please, I promise I'll do it next time." And of course, because Turlough wants to kill the Doctor, the only way to have him not kill the Doctor is either keep trying to kill the Doctor and fail, or be separated from the Doctor. So they have to keep them apart, and that's reasonable. And the characters all splitting up is part and parcel of what we do with Doctor Who. So she said, so that's what you're getting at. Yeah, she's not being given an awful lot of meaty stuff, is she, poor Lisa Goddard? I like the image of the dead astronaut, the dead pilot, and this is where the story, takes an interesting turn. This element of the story sort of comes out of nowhere. The engines are broken, but suddenly we're going, oh yeah, we're gonna talk about the Big Bang. She got to say the Big Bang. And this is a nice idea of going, so something we think of as an entirely natural thing is, why? What Doctor Who's responsible for the Great Fire of London? Why can't it be responsible for a slightly bigger and more important fire? But but if but I'm not sure. Am I being thick? I think I've got the thing about how Terminus works out. Excuse, but if he time jumped it forward, having dumped the fuel, does that mean he travelled backward to dump the fuel? I'm not entirely sure where Terminus comes from and where its time is. Is that me being thick? Because it's obviously from a time when they've got this company and the veneer and all that sort of thing. So it doesn't just willy-nilly travel in time, but it can if it needs to. And you sort of think, well, if you can travel in time, do you really need to be a not very good hospital run by slaves? Couldn't you do all sorts of things? Anyway, I don't know. Perhaps I'm being thick. What's happening? Oh, poor old Lisa Goddard is she's not getting the meatiest stuff, is she? But I like the lights going on and off and flashing. So the story is now the jeopardy's really been heightened. And I like the little bits of dust on the switch. So I think that was a really good episode. I think that was very exciting. I love Bohr. I love the fact that the story has taken this really strange left turn and gone, oh yeah, it's not just about this dodgy plague ship. It's about a series of events that started and could end the universe, which as I say, you're not really expecting, and it started to move a bit. So I have to choose a favourite thing, and I have to go back to school. So that was it. That was all my Doctor Who for that year. I think I got a good episode. That's certainly the best episode of Terminus so far. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was quite a ride. So I think that's going to go to the menu. So I have to choose a thing. And I think I'm going to play tactically, because I think there's no way you cannot choose Peter Benson as Bohr. And if I don't choose him now, Laurence Clark, my guest, comedian Laurence Clark, might. And if he chooses him next time, well, that's okay, because I get the point next time. Whereas if he chooses him this time and I don't get the point. So I am going to choose Peter Benson's Bohr. I think he's a lovely character. I think he's even more lovely because of the casting, which on its own is very, very good. But then, he does what you would hope an idiosyncratic actor like Peter Benson would do. And I think he's pitch perfect and really watchable. And you like it every time he turns up. So I'm choosing Peter Benson as Bohr as my thing for part 3.
So part 3, I think the highlight for me is the fake human figure, which Aubrey makes out of the old cloaks. Again, for no apparent reason. I don't know why he wants to fool people into thinking that he's still standing there. I looked absolutely nothing like a person, but it still feels cigarette. I also love Peter Benson and this whole thing is Bohr, because there just aren't enough Scousers in Doctor Who. And I think amongst a cast of, let's face it, some quite bland characters, he really stands out. So yeah, I love Bohr.
So Laurence chose two things there, but I think one of them he was being cheeky about, which I didn't even talk about, which was the fake mannequin set up by Olvia to just slightly annoy anybody who was partially sighted and had and didn't bother to check that thing that doesn't look like a person isn't a person. It's a funny old beat in the story. But yes, he chose Peter Benson. He chose Peter Benson. So that's a point for me, which means that if I get both of Lawrence's next two things, and I'm sort of kicking myself because I should have gone for the skirt in part 2 rather than Olvia's boots. But I'm not sure how I would have felt about choosing the skirt in part 2. But it is probably the most memorable moment of the episode. Anyway, done now. Can't do anything about it. So that is part 3, which is a victory for me. Appropriate that the episode that I was allowed to watch all those years ago is the one that came through for me again. And it is, in fact, coming through for me in the story, because I think the story's really picked up and there's quite a lot going on. And, the stakes are really high now. So let's see what happens in part 4, where if we're not careful, it's the end of the world, boys. But not right now. Right now, it's the end of this episode of Happy Times and Places. Thank you. Goodbye. Thanks so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest is Laurence Clark, who can be found on Twitter at Laurence_Clark. Thanks so much to the many patrons who make these broadcasts possible. I'm going to say some of their names now. Alex Kafajoglu, Rick Byatt, Will Brooks, Peter Adamson, Luke Adkins, Barry Platt, Darren Mackay, Joe Llewellyn, Ian Key, Siobhan Galichon, Jason Gorman, Chris Phone, Chris Dunford-Kelk, John Deere, Rob Dawson, Peter Crocker, Paul Cook, Paul Carrington, Jenny at Bluebox 99, David, Richard Straw, Stephen Moffat, Rob Leonard, Peter Harness, Peter Burns, Ruben Herfindahl, Robin Bland, Sydney Wilson, Peter Ware, Rich Wiggins, Gavin Ware, Alistair Wallace, Gary Wales, John Turner, Sidney Truitt, Jason Thompson and Paul Taylor-Greaves. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. So, you want to be a patron? Well, that's easy. Go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where you will find advance releases, exclusive material, interactive stuff, and a few extra bits and bobs. And most importantly, I think you get all of these podcasts much, much earlier. Happy Times and Places is, I think, 4 months ahead in Patronville, and the Too Much Information and Indefinable Magic ones are a month to 6 weeks ahead too. But there's exclusive stuff, interviews with actors, written material, pictures of my dog, and certain tiers you also get a badge. So it's fairly egalitarian. Most things, apart from the physical stuff, physical stuff as in a badge, it's a physical manifestation. I have to post it. I'm not saying any patrons get physical stuff off me. I mean you can't put a price on such things. But most stuff is available from the lowest tier at £3 per month, and you can also get a 10% discount on any tier if you sign up for a whole year in advance. I know this is begging bowl stuff, but self-employed freelancers who churn the stuff out have to do this stuff these days, and so it is with due humility that I hold out my cap for a Ko-fi if you don't want to do the monthly thing, which is perfectly understandable. Ko-fi enables you to donate whenever you like. Perhaps you just listened to one you particularly enjoyed, or you've just won the lottery, or you think I look particularly hungry, and that's you can pay what you like, when you like, as often or not as you like. But look, I also know that COVID and the general economic situation in the world and the way that we do entertainment stuff these days means that money is not available to everybody. And look, you are still welcome listeners. It's nice that there's a community out there who listen to this stuff. But if you could tweet nice stuff about it, tell your friends, and most importantly, and also like the tweeting, absolutely free, if you could go to iTunes or any podcast dispenser and give these a 5-star rating and just 1 or 2 lines of positive review. That really helps to make this stand out from the crowd. And if it stands out from the crowd, any passing internet wanderer who may not be aware of the goodies that are available within this podcast series will suddenly, their life will change. They got a year's worth of this stuff to get them through whatever disaster awaits us all. Okay, plug over. Thanks. I have a website, www.tobyhadoke.com, that's got a blog and clips and various bits and bobs on it. I'm on Twitter at Toby Hadoke. These podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts. And I do a comedy night in Manchester every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. called Excess Malarkey. That's also on Twitter. And for those of you that don't live in Manchester, it's also monthly online, twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey, 8 p.m. every first Sunday of the month. But there's also an archive and past shows and clips and bits and bobs up there right now if you want to see what that has to offer. Thank you very much. I do say and an awful lot for somebody whose métier is supposed to be speaking. If I'm reading a script, fine, I'm and free. But if I'm extemporizing, as I do, I don't write down the plugs for Patreon and comedy nights. I know they're not rigorously scripted. Can you tell? Yeah, you can, because I go a lot and See, I've just done it there. I've just ummed. It's horrible. I'm in the wrong business. No, I can't be. It's too late. I can't do anything else now. But isn't that interesting? Oh, well, sorry about that. See? No, see, if I had people, I would have some factotum and I'd go, listen to everything and chop out all the ums. You could feed a small country on the amount of ums that probably in one of these commentaries, if ums were indeed comestible. Anyway, I'll be quiet now. See? Oh, and dear. Oh, well, I suppose to is human. That's what that means.